I do have a couple quick questions. For the Department of Justice, do we have any estimate of how many of these ammo clips are out there, ammo magazines are out there?
Because they're not tracked and regulated, it would be hard to speculate, but I would agree with some of the individuals that were up here. They're probably in the millions.
Okay. And then if I could have somebody who spoke in opposition, one of the witnesses, are there, if they could work their way back up here, we certainly know of the case in Georgia, Mrs. Herman. It was last year was very popular in all the press about the woman with the small children who there was an intruder. She went through 3 doors, locking them and moving up to her attic to hide with her children as the person would break down the door one after another, coming for her and her kids. And she had a weapon. Now, it wasn't a high-capacity magazine, but she unloaded 6 rounds, I believe 5, hit the intruder. It was enough of a deterrent that he got into his car and he drove away. The police apprehended him later. Had he had somebody with him, would that high-capacity magazine been of use to her? Perhaps yes. I think so. But are there any stats showing how often those types of weapons are used for home defense or personal defense by men and women? And if there's a breakdown of how many women's lives have been saved because of that, I'm just curious.
Senator, thank you for the question. We do know, and we agree that more research is needed, but the research, the body of research that out there indicates that, and I'm just going to go with the number that Attorney General Janet Reno went with while she was the Attorney General of the United States. She reported that 1.5 million times a year law-abiding citizens use guns to successfully defend themselves, 1.5 million. We know that the research that was provided to her indicated that that number was probably closer to 3 million, and through a variety of changes and edits, they came down and admitted that at least 1.5 million times a year. Now, California happens to be about, what, 20% of the population of the country, and at least 10% of everything that happens nationwide happens in California. So you're looking at 150,000 times a year the law-abiding citizens use guns to defend themselves in the state of California. Most of the times, many times, it's admitted, even law enforcement will admit it, that they're not reported because they're fearful of the process of reporting that. But those that are reported, you know, they find that they are justified. And in the case that you are absolutely correct, the woman did everything correctly. She gathered her children, she took them to an attic. An intruder broke in through the door, came in after him, saying that he was going to kill them. And she used this small revolver that she had, shot all the rounds in the revolver, hit the perpetrator. He got out, got into his car, and started to drive himself to the emergency ward. Had he had an accomplice, she would have had no ability to protect herself at that point in time. So that is not an uncommon scenario, Senator. You know, that's why law enforcement officers are no longer limited to having 6-round revolvers with a couple of speed loaders. That's why they are using semi-automatic handguns that have capacities to shoot up to 18 rounds, because they cannot be placed in a defensive disadvantage. They're not standing there with 24 and 50-round magazines, and your average citizen isn't either. They're using the standard magazines that came with the gun that had 11 to 18 rounds. That constitutes more than 90% of all of the high-capacity magazines.
Now, this is an open question to Department of Justice or whoever would like to answer this. Of the shooting incidences that were brought forward earlier, were those all with legal weapons, with legal capacity, with legal, or were some of those gray market or black market, or did they purchase them not from a gun dealer?
It really depends on the incident and in the state that it happened. For instance, the San Bernardino shooting, those guns were purchased legally, however, they were converted to illegal weapons, and the high-capacity magazines that they had were illegal here in California. How they got them, we do not know.
Okay. Maybe we could hear from the Brady. I know that you're terrific with statistics, so I didn't know if you had a statistic to share with us on this issue.
The shooter in Tucson and in Aurora and in Sandy Hook were not prohibited. So my assumption is that they are law-abiding. They've got their guns legally. I take the gun lobby at their word when they say that most of their members are law-abiding. And I would assume the law-abiding people would follow this law. And unfortunately, law-abiding people sometimes become very unstable, and then they do these horrific acts.
Thank you. Look, all these shootings are horrible. And the idea that somebody could have so many rounds on them to really attack and force is outrageous. But on the flip side, as I look at the issue, we haven't been able to stop the spread of drugs. We haven't stopped drugs coming across our borders, but we're going to somehow stop high magazine capacity from coming across our borders for those who choose to do illegal acts. Seems much more difficult. And then I weigh it against the fact that if you're a slightly built person, whether you're male or female, and somebody menacing is coming at you, don't you have a right to protect your home, your children, yourself? It's difficult for me to support this bill today because I can't help but think of all those women, the Mrs. Hermans of the world, that we are denying them the ability to live in a free society where they're not worried about being assaulted or attacked in their own home. I just think, and I have gone to the range. I periodically practice with my weapon so that if I'm ever confronted, that I'll be accurate and cool and calm. And all I can think about is how often, if I'm excited to be there, and there's a certain joy and release when you fire one of those weapons at a target, that my blood gets pumping and my accuracy gets off. And I reflect on that person where the attacker is coming through 3 doors to get at her and her children, and how her hand must be shaking as she's trying to protect her family. And what if she didn't hit him 5 out of the 6 rounds? What if she hit him once and was just enough to anger him further? I think that when you draw a weapon in self-defense, you're not doing it as a careless act. You're doing it as an act to protect yourself. And if she had waited for law enforcement, their sheriff in Georgia said that she would have been a victim because they couldn't possibly respond in time. Much of my district is rural San Diego County, and at the best, and the sheriff do a fantastic job, but sometimes it takes 10 minutes, sometimes 15 minutes if there's a lot of activity. That's not a reasonable amount of time to allow a woman or a person that feels endangered to be able to protect themselves. And so I'm worried moving forward with this that we'll create more harm than good, because I don't believe that this bill will stop somebody who intends on hurting people and violate the law in hurting them, not working within the law, but outside the law, from actually getting the high magazine capacity. We look back, and a few years ago, there was a big bank robbery in Los Angeles. All the equipment that the shooters had were illegal. They had the best weapons, the best protection, things that you can't buy in the open market, and yet they were able to procure them as they worked their way through the city, shooting up everybody and everything in sight. So I apologize because I love the author, and I think she does a fantastic job, but this is not a bill I'll be supporting today.